Science has documented our warming climate, how we're responsible for changing it, and how we only have a limited time to reduce our use of carbon to prevent it from spiraling out of control. Individuals have been documenting the change too. When the ice sets on their nearby pond, when the spring birds arrive in the backyard, when bees first emerge. For our climate change series, we've been talking with North Country people who are documenting the change in real time. The first of our climate diaries on today's story of the day.
Support for Story of the Day comes from Pearsall Wealth Management at UBS Wealth Management USA, subsidiary UBS AG, member FINRA SIPC, 1 Broad Street, Glens Falls.
Hey, I'm David Sommerstein. It's Monday, June 10th. First up, let's sift through the embers of the New York State legislative session. It ended over the weekend with a number of issues left on the table. A lot of the negotiations got upended when Governor Kathy Hochul made a surprise decision to halt the planned congestion pricing in Manhattan, less than a month before it was scheduled to begin. Karen DeWitt reports for the New York Public News Network.
Governor Hochul, 2 days before the session was to end, reversed her position on congestion pricing. She said she no longer backed a plan that would charge private vehicles at least $15 each time they entered Manhattan south of 60th Street. The governor, who a month earlier touted congestion pricing during an international climate change summit in Europe, now said it would cost average New Yorkers too much money to commute.
Given these financial pressures, I cannot add another burden to working and middle-class New Yorkers or create another obstacle to our continued recovery.
The announcement was met with relief by some Democratic state lawmakers and congressional representatives who represent suburban swing districts in the Hudson Valley and on Long Island. And it appeared to address a concern that the implementation of congestion pricing could be weaponized by Republicans in several closely fought congressional races. In 2022, 4 House seats flipped in blue New York to the GOP, helping give Republicans control of that chamber. But the governor alienated top Democrats in the legislature. They called it a political betrayal. Senate Finance Chair Liz Krueger spoke at a rally to protest the governor's decision.
She's got to reverse herself on this. This is a terrible decision.
Krueger openly invited people to bring lawsuits to try to reverse the decision. With just a couple of days left in the session, Hochul also asked the Senate and Assembly to fill a $1 billion hole in the Metropolitan Transportation Authority budget caused by the halt to congestion pricing. A mobile payroll tax on businesses was immediately rejected, and an alternative proposal to approve a loosely structured IOU to the MTA was discussed. As late as Friday afternoon, Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie said options were still on the table.
You have to make a decision on raising revenues, so you either have to do that now, sometime between now and January, or January.
But the Senate adjourned Friday evening, and the Assembly finished its business after pulling an all-nighter early on Saturday without agreeing. The MTA, in a statement, warned that without a new funding source, some key improvement projects, including updating signals, making more stations accessible, and buying more electric buses, would be put on hold. Hochul's announcement also threw a wrench into attempts to reach agreement on a number of other issues. While 2 bills championed by the governor to regulate children's social media feeds quietly passed, several environmental and climate change-related ones did not make it to the finish line. They include the New York Heat Act. It would stop utilities from automatically charging ratepayers for new gas lines, an expanded bottle deposit law, and a measure to reduce plastic packaging. Liz Moran with Earth Justice spoke at an 11th hour rally for the bills. She says lawmakers approved the Climate Change Protection Act in 2019. It has a goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 85% by 2050. But she says since then, Democrats who lead Albany have not been willing to take the steps needed to actually reach that aim. And she says the governor's decision to cancel congestion pricing, combined with the failure of the other bills to gain traction, is disturbing.
This is taking us backwards and we need to be to meet our climate law mandates and protect people and save them money.
A bill to require big oil and other energy companies to pay for climate change mitigation was approved, but it faces an uncertain future on Hochul's desk. Hochul, as well as leaders of the legislature, say that this might not be the end of their meetings in 2024. They say they may need to return before the end of the year to address the funding crisis caused by Hochul's decision. In Albany, I'm Karen DeWitt for the New York Public News Network.
This past winter was the warmest ever in much of the North Country, according to data from the National Weather Service. Our changing climate is already impacting the North Country's economy by shortening the tourism season for winter sports. And those mild winters affect people's lives and livelihoods. For our climate change series, our reporter Lucy Grindon spoke to a waitress in Lewis County. Here's her climate diary.
I'm Mary Lynn Fager, and I live in Branningham, New York, right across from the famous Tug Hill Plateau, where all the snowmobilers come to snowmobile.
Fager waits tables a few nights a week at a restaurant called the Coachlight Inn, a stop on a Lewis County snowmobile trail. Her full-time day job is with the local BOCES. She tutors kids whose parents are migrant workers, employed temporarily at nearby farms or lumber companies. But that doesn't pay enough to cover her expenses.
My rent money, my car payment, all my bills, and my travel money for visiting my family all comes out of my tips.
Usually during snowmobile season, she makes $200 or $300 in tips every night. She saves as much of that as she can to buy plane tickets to Colorado.
I really try to get out to Denver and visit my mom at least every 2 months because my mom has Alzheimer's and she's in a phase where sometimes she looks at me and asks me who I am, and sometimes she's her normal self. And so I want to get as much time with her as I can while she still has the ability to know who I am and enjoy our time together.
Fager grew up in Branningham, and she says there was always lots of snow when she was a kid. All winter long, she'd be at the local ski area.
I skied 7 days a week usually, from my birthday
in late November
to my brother's birthday
in late April.
Every single year in the 70s and 80s. That was with no snowmaking. Now they have snowmaking, and they're barely open. I mean, it's just changed incredibly.
This past winter was the starkest example yet.
There were only 2 weekends all winter that there was enough snow for people to ride the trails around here.
That hit local businesses really hard.
There were more staff many nights than customers.
Fager was only making $15 or $20 a night in tips, instead of her usual $200 to $300. But she kept working all winter, trying to save up enough money to go see her mom and hoping for snow.
I just kept on thinking, well, it hasn't come yet, but it's going to come soon. And so I tried to keep a positive perspective, and I kept on expecting that people would still come and spend time here, even if they weren't snowmobiling, and they didn't.
She thought about getting another job.
And then I realized that really, even getting a third job as a server in the restaurants around here wasn't going to do me any good because everyone else is in the same boat. The local businesses are all trying to figure out how to get through the winter when how could you ever expect that there would be 2 good snowmobiling weekends all winter long?
Fager says the whole community was struggling, especially her fellow restaurant workers.
It just got to the point where all of us would get together and, we didn't have much else to talk about besides the lack of snow.
They kept waiting, but snowmobile season just never came.
So for me, that meant that it's now been, oh my goodness, more than 5 months since I saw my mom.
And with the climate getting warmer over time, things might not be any better next year. For right now, business is improving at the Coachlight Inn. With summer coming, people are riding there on their ATVs. Fager's making more money in tips, and she's finally been able to save enough for plane tickets.
This 5 months has felt really, 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 really long for her. And it's felt long for me, too. 5 months is a long time not to see her.
After almost half a year of waiting, Fager's out in Colorado this week, spending some much-needed time with her mom. Lucy Grindon, North Country Public Radio.
NCPR's Climate Change series is made possible through the generous support of Margot and John Ernst. We got the tip for this story from NCPR's Texting Club. If you have something to say about climate change in your community, text the word climate to 315-978-6277. Music today by famous letter writer of Plattsburgh and Patricia Julian of Burlington. I'm David Summerstein, North Country Public Radio.